Hi, I'm Vickie Speek, and you're listening to Gospel Tangents.
The best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have one of the premier James Strang experts on the show, Vickie Cleverly Speek. So Vickie was kind enough to take me on an airboat ride while I was in Florida right after this interview. So it's a fun conversation. You won't want to miss it. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to be here in Florida in the wonderful weather with a wonderful historian. Could you go ahead and tell us who you are and where we are?
Hi, I'm Vickie Speek, and you're on Gospel Tangents.
And we're here in Florida. What part of Florida?
We are here in the sun coast of Florida in Port Charlotte, about between Naples and between Naples and Tampa.
Okay. So, Florida in January, if you've never experienced it, I got to tell you guys, it's awesome.
80 degrees today.
Yeah. It's pretty warm. So anyway, we're excited. Vickie is one of the preeminent historians on James Strang. And, we should have got your book. You've got a book. Tell us about your book. What's the name of your book?
God Has Made Us a Kingdom, James Strang and the Midwest Mormons.
Well, we spoke to Kyle Bashir a few days ago about one of James Strang's wives, but we want to dive deep in. I've also talked to Bill Shepard. Mm-hmm. And can you tell my audience what's the difference between, say, your book and Bill Shepard's book?
Bill Shepard is a Strangite. And at the time when I wrote my book, I was a member of the LDS Church. And I had never heard of James Strang before. At the time, my family was living in northern Illinois, and I was learning how to make baskets. It was a big deal back then. It was really a big fad, making homemade baskets.
Okay.
I decided that I needed some basket material, and the nearest basket making place was in Burlington, Wisconsin, which was about 30 miles away from our home. So I drove over to the basket craft place, and I noticed that it was on the corner of Highway and Mormon Road.
Mormon Road.
Oh,
wow. That caught your radar?
No, not Mormon Road. I'm like a 6th or 7th generation Mormon, and I had never heard of Mormons in Wisconsin.
Right.
Never in any of my seminary classes, in any of my church classes, college classes, I'd never heard about Mormons in Wisconsin.
Right.
So I went down the road. And that's when I learned about James Strang and the Strangites.
Wow. Now tell us a little bit about your background. I'm calling you a historian, but that's not what your career was in. What was your career in?
I went to college on a journalism scholarship. And I worked for many, many years as a stringer or a freelance correspondent.
And which college?
I went to Rick's College.
Oh, Rick's? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I went to Rick's College.
Now known as BYU, Idaho.
And I was all intent on having a journalism career. And I met a young man from the Navy. And we got married and we're gone. We met on the 20th of April and we were married 30 days later.
Oh my goodness. You're one of those.
On the 19th of May. Love at first sight.
Wow. Rick's was just a 2-year college. Now it's a 4-year college.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, wow. So how long were you just a newspaper reporter?
For about 30 years.
Oh, wow.
I was a stay-at-home mom with 4 kids for 25 years. And then I started back to work as a features reporter and as a correspondent covering school board meetings and village board meetings, things like that. And from there, I went into freelance writing and freelance editing.
Okay. And so you're a trained reporter, which weaves in pretty good with being a historian as well.
But I guess the historian part came when I wanted to find out about the Mormons in Wisconsin.
Right.
When you go down Mormon Road, you come to a little cemetery, and there's a cemetery marker there that says Voree Cemetery. And then there's another marker a little bit further away that talks about the Hill of Promise where James Strang found ancient buried records in the ground, and he dug them up and translated them. And I started to become very suspicious. I went down a little road a little bit further, and there's the Boree home, and it talks about the baptisms that were performed in the White River. I thought, this is like deja vu. Yeah. And I wanted to find out more about it. I went to the Burlington Library, and I started to research James Strang. I found out all the different books about James Strang, started to read them, and started to research about him, and I found out that James Strang had 5 wives at one time, all of them at the same time, and 4 of them were pregnant at the time he was murdered.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
And I thought, that's terrible. What happened to those women? And none of the books that I read could tell me what happened to those women that no longer had a husband. So that started my research. I started into going to all the different places around where I could find information about the Strangites. And I just wanted to know what the story was about these women. And what I found out was that these women were parts of families who had joined James Strang. So it wasn't the story of the women that I was looking at. It was the actual story of the Strangites. And that's what I wanted to write. It's kind of like family history.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. So can you tell us the time frame? What year was this where you were, they always make a joke about, so did you take underwater basket weaving, but
right.
You took above water basket weaving, right?
I did.
What year was this approximately?
About 1992.
Okay.
And I could not start writing that book for 10 years. I did 10 years of research.
Wow.
Because I had 4 kids to take care of.
Oh, okay.
And then I started working. So it took a long time to be able to have the confidence to be able to write it into a book. Actually, what happened was that I went to Beaver Island and I talked to the head of the Historical Association there. His name was Bill Cashman. And Bill Cashman invited me to write an article about the 5 wives of James Strang. So that's when I really started doing the research so I could write the article for him. One day I was driving to Madison, Wisconsin, and I suddenly had an epiphany. And that epiphany was that I was actually looking at the story of the Strangites, not the women, and that it belonged in a book.
Oh, okay.
The article became a book, and people have said that it's similar to a family history, and I suppose in a way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and Bill Shepard's book is more of a theology book, right?
Yes.
Kind of the revelations of James Strang and that sort of a thing. So you're more of the history.
I'm more of the history. I'm really not interested very much in theology. It sounds kind of funny, but I really am not. I don't care about the different ways of belief and the different, you can only worship this way and you can only worship that way. I just want to know things like, what families had twins? And there was one Strangite family that had 3 sets of twins.
I think you mentioned that in your presentation,
yes.
Right? Yeah. Because you're doing like a census of the Strangites.
I'm doing the story of the Strangites, and I'm not taking a side whether they were good, whether they were bad. I just want to know what happened to them. So, and I found out Charlie Douglas, who's Elvira Field, who was dressed as a man. She tried to learn the accordion, but then it was not good, and she returned the accordion. And that's the kind of stuff that I was interested in.
Oh, wow.
Not the theology. And I realized that theology is what made the Strangites the Strangites. But I just want to know the story.
this is why we get along, because this is how I am with all the restoration groups. I just want to know. There's so many people that fight about, well, is it true? Is it false? Who's got the true doctrine? Who has the false doctrine? And I mean, I'm interested that there are differences, but I'm not here to settle the fight. I don't care.
Well, that's the same here. And a lot of people have said, well, do you think that James Strang was a real prophet?
Oh, I get that question a lot.
Or do you think he was fake?
Yeah. How do you respond?
It really doesn't matter to me, because the people who followed him thought he was real. They thought he was a prophet. And so that's the way that I approached it.
Yeah. I remember hearing you say that you approached it as a reporter, trying to be unbiased.
Correct.
And fair. And
trying to be unbiased and fair, and both sides of the story on Beaver Island and in Voree.
And so, how have the Strangites received your story?
The Strangites have been very, very kind to me. I purposely did not talk to them when I was first writing the book, because I did not want to be influenced by them. I tried calling a prominent Strangite and asked to see some records, and I was told that they were being put into a vault and being classified, or cataloged, and I could not see any of those documents. But the other Strangites later on were very, very kind to me. I purposely went to a John Whitmer Historical Association conference, and I believe that was in either 2000 or 2002. I purposely went to meet Bill Shepard.
Bill's awesome.
And my book was almost done, and I thought, it's time to have it verified. So I went to Bill's session at Nauvoo, and we were up in the upstairs of the red brick store.
Really?
He did a presentation, and I went up to him afterward, and I said, my name's Vickie Speek, and I'm doing a book about James Strang. He says, well, I'm really pleased to meet you. Come on, we're going out to lunch. You want to come with us?
That is so Bill.
This total Bill. So I said, yeah. He says, well, come on, let's go. So we went to a little diner that was in Nauvoo. There were 4 Strangites, 2 RLDS, 2 LDS, and an Episcopalian.
Okay.
So the Strangites were David and Sue August, Bill Shepard and his wife. There was Jerry Gordon, who was a descendant of Warren Post, who was one of James Strang's apostles. I can't remember the other RLDS, but the 2 LDS were Richard Bennett and me.
Not me, though.
And Mel Johnson.
The short version of me.
And then Mel Johnson.
Oh, Mel's awesome.
So we had quite an interesting lunch, and we shared our information, and we got along very, very well.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun group.
It was a really fun group. And then afterward, Richard Bennett and I walked around the Nauvoo Temple.
I think he was my 3rd, 4th interview, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. He's a good guy.
Yes, he's a very good guy.
I call him my name twin. So.
And I have found those people to be so accommodating.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and Bill Shepard said, well, come on up to my house, and you can go over any files you want.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, because Bill is so kind.
It was only 30 miles away from where I lived, so the following weekend, I went up and I stayed at his house, and I spent Friday night and all day Saturday looking through all of his files that he had, and we went over to the Strangite church, and he let me make photocopies, and it's just very accommodating and very kind to me. And then he invited all of I went to church on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, because they meet on Saturday, yeah.
I went to church with them. and very nice. And then we all went out to dinner because that's a big thing that they do on Saturdays after church.
Oh, really?
They all go out to dinner. They all go out to eat.
I want to go. I need to go there sometime. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to plan a trip to Beaver Island. Are you game?
Sure.
Okay.
It's been a long time
We'll
since
try
I've
to get
been there.
you, Kyle. I know Casey Griffiths wants to go. John Hamer, I think, wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if just those 4 people alone, would be just an awesome trip. So we'll see. We'll work out dates off camera. So.
Well, something that I'm trying to do is to draw up a map of where people lived on Beaver Island. So I have some maps, and I'm trying to put, well, this is where the print shop was, this is where Strang lived, this is where the stores were, this is where the Prindle house was, and I'm trying to put all that together so that I have an accurate description of where the sawmill was, all that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Well, let's jump into the life of James Strang. It's been a few years since I interviewed Bill Shepard, and when I talked to Kyle, we just went over it very briefly. So how did James Strang become acquainted with Joseph Smith?
James Strang grew up in New York, and he was only maybe 100 miles south of Palmyra. So he must have known about the Mormons when he was a young man. James Strang was born in 1813 in Chautauqua. His parents were very good parents. They had 3 children. He was enormously intelligent from the time that he was a young man. Even an infant, he can remember things. He had a photographic memory. And he could remember his mother and his aunts talking when he was a baby. And he could recall the conversations, and they verified it.
Wow.
When he was a baby.
So he had a photographic memory. That's interesting.
Yeah, he did. He married a woman named Mary Pierce, or Pierce. And her relatives were Aaron and Moses Smith, who were early members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Pierce family moved to Burlington, Wisconsin, and when James got married to Mary, they encouraged him to come to Burlington as well. So, and James Strang's best friend was Mary's uncle. So, they're all related in there somehow. But in January 1844, James Strang was a lawyer, and he went to Ottawa, Illinois, to litigate some kind of case that was there. And he was friends with the Sanger family that lived in Ottawa.
Sanger, you said?
Sanger. Mm-hmm. And Aaron Smith was also there, and he invited James Strang to go to Nauvoo. So Strang and Aaron Smith both went to Nauvoo, where they met up with Joseph Smith. And I know that James Strang had dinner with Joseph Smith and his wife, with Emma, and they talked about the church. And it turned out that James Strang was baptized by Joseph Smith in the unfinished basement of the Nauvoo Temple.
Oh, wow.
And then he was confirmed by Hiram Smith the end of February.
The assistant president of the church at the time.
Mm-hmm. Then
this is, you said this is January,
this
February?
This is February 1844.
Okay.
And in March 1844, when James Strang was still in Nauvoo, the Council of 50 was organized. So he was aware of that. James Strang knew about that.
Wasn't that a secret organization?
Uh-huh.
How was he aware if it was secret?
Because he knew the people that were there.
They didn't keep secrets very well.
They didn't keep their secrets very well. And he knew about polygamy, too, because one of his relatives was involved with polygamy.
In Nauvoo?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard that before, because he was pretty anti-polygamy when he started.
Moses Smith's daughter was married into polygamy.
To?
I think it's Jonathan Edwards.
There's a Jonathan Edwards as a theologian, but this just is a Mormon Jonathan Edwards. Okay.
And he was a nobody in Nauvoo.
Okay.
But it still was polygamy.
Okay.
So James Strang.
So you think he knew this as as early as 1844 when he was baptized?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Well, after he was baptized, he was very astute, and he could pick up on things very, very quickly.
Huh, that's interesting.
Very quickly, and he was very, very smart. So Strang went back to Burlington, and apparently he had been asked by Joseph Smith to see if Burlington would be a good place for the saints to go, because it was becoming very apparent that they were going to have to leave Nauvoo. So James Strang was supposed to go back and give Joseph Smith a report. Well, it just so happened that James Strang had a lot of acreage in the Burlington area. That he said, yeah, it would be a good place for them to come.
Was that a conflict of interest?
Maybe. Maybe so. But
I mean, even with Joseph Smith, there's kind of a charge that with Kirtland and Independence and Nauvoo, Joseph was in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And the idea was he gets in early, sells the land to the new people, makes money.
And they're all safe, and they all have everything in common, so they're good. And supposedly on June 18th, Joseph Smith wrote a reply to James Strang saying, well, I really thought that I was going to send you an answer saying that no, I don't think that we're going to go up to Boree, but everybody around me, Hiram, says that I should say that, yeah, we should go to Boree, and everybody says that we should go up to Boree. And then, but I didn't think so. But then the Lord told me that I should make a favorable reply to your letter, because I feel like we're going to need some place of safety, and the people would be in the land of safety if they came up to that area, and I want you to be in charge of the flock.
This is known as the letter of appointment? This is called the
letter of appointment. And basically, it's 2 pages written on 3 sides, and then the envelope was the back of the 4th side. Okay. And some people say that it was merely Joseph Smith telling James Strang to go up and start a stake or a ward or a branch in Boree, and that he should be in charge of it. But James Strang said that he was supposed to be the leader. But it really shouldn't have surprised Strang to get that letter, because the letter was written on June 18th, and it was mailed on June 19th. It arrived in Burlington, I believe, on July 4th. But on June 27th, Joseph Smith and his brother were murdered. And at the very time that they were murdered, an angel came down to James Strang and anointed him to be the leader of the church at the very moment that Joseph Smith died.
So I want to ask you a little bit about this letter of appointment, because when I read it, it reads very vague. It doesn't read to me as Joseph Smith saying, James, you're the number 2, you're going to be in charge.
Even though you've only been a member of the church for 4 months.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of strange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I know John Hamer has said,
if anybody was going to be the next prophet after Joseph Smith, it was going to be Hiram. But of course, Hiram was killed at the same time Joseph was, and that's kind of what threw it open for almost anybody. Do you think James Strang took advantage of the situation, or?
Now you're asking me to take a biased opinion, right? You're forcing me into an opinion.
I know. That's what we have to do, right? As a reporter, you can respect that.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that James Strang went to Nauvoo for the first time, and he saw the things that Joseph Smith had done with Nauvoo, and how this country boy, Joseph, had become the leader of these people. And James Strang thought, well, I'm a whole lot smarter than Joseph Smith. I can do this too. And he went back to Wisconsin, and he did copy everything that Joseph Smith did in Nauvoo, including finding buried records and having them translated, including visions, including baptisms, including everything that Joseph Smith had done.
Okay.
And I think that at the very beginning, he was probably out for profit.
Oh, really?
But I believe that he started believing his own stories.
Oh, wow.
And became convinced that he was a prophet.
A kind of a self-delusion?
Yes.
Oh, really? That's interesting. That's interesting. The letter of appointment, I will tell you from personal experience, if you want to tick off a Strangite, ask him whether the letter of appointment is a forgery. But I feel like as a good reporter, journalist, whatever, podcaster, I have to ask the question. Do you have an opinion on that?
I think it's a forgery.
Okay.
I think that somebody sent a letter to James Strang, and it was there was the envelope page number 4 had a blank page on the other side of it. So whoever wrote that letter kept the envelope page and wrote their own letter on 3 sides, the 3 other pages, and put it together, because the 2 pages of paper do not match. They're not from the same tablet. And understand that Joseph Smith had scribes who would sign his letters for him, copy his letters for him, but apparently the block printing of Joseph Smith's name on the letter is something that's very unusual, that most people have never seen before.
So it doesn't look like Joseph Smith's signature.
It does not look like Joseph Smith's signature.
But it's interesting that you said that some of his scribes did sign.
Yes.
And they were just really good at Joseph Smith's signature?
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they would copy letters for him or transcribe letters for him. So that's that handwriting doesn't have to be in Joseph Smith's hand. But the signature would have to be in his hand, because I don't think that they copied Joseph Smith's signature for him, his scribes. They would say, here, sign this letter. And he would sign it. But in this case, the letters were in block print. They were printed instead of in cursive.
So, yeah. There's also a very interesting story about the postmark, which some, I'll say Brighamites, opponents of James Strang, said, oh, this is a clear forgery, but it ended up kind of backfiring on them and said, no, this is this is proof of authenticity. Can you tell us that story?
All letters had to have some kind of a postmark on them. The postmark that came from Nauvoo was red. And it just so happened that on that day, a speck of dust or a little bit of debris of something got into the postmark seal. And so every letter that was mailed from Nauvoo on that day had some kind of a little mark in it that was in every single postmark that was sent from that day, from Nauvoo. So the postmark is real. We know that.
Okay. And so So what Brighamites used to say, well, this speck is proof of a forgery, later became
it is
because
true.
it's on all of the other
It's
letters.
on all these other ones.
It's a legit.
However, I did find somebody later on who said that Strang's law partner wrote the letter.
Oh,
that,
really?
That both Caleb Barnes and James Strang were law partners, and that they concocted a plan to have the Saints come to Voree so they could sell the property. And Caleb Barnes was the one who wrote the letter.
And so the implication is James Strang had a bunch of land, wanted to sell it to the Mormons. He goes to get baptized conveniently. Hey, let's go to Wisconsin.
Right.
Some great land up there.
It's great land up there, and you don't have to cross the plains. You don't have to go on Indian country. You got sick people in your house. You got old people. Come up to Voree. And that was the intent.
Okay. What do you think of that story? Is that true? Is that
A
what
lot
James
of
Strang
people
was trying to
went
do?
to Voree, but that's because, in the same manner of Joseph Smith, James Strang had a vision of ancient buried records, brass plates that were buried in a box under a tree. So he went out and he got 4 of the best known, most respected men in the community to go with him. And they went up to the spot where James Strang said he knew where these plates were buried. It was in a huge oak tree. It was like a foot in diameter. And he told them where to dig. Now, they all examined around the tree. The grass was undisturbed. There was no sign at all that anything had ever been buried underneath that tree. When they started taking down the tree, there were rocks. They had to cut out tree roots in order to get down in the ground, and there's no way that anybody could have put those in the ground from above. But when they got down to a certain point, a foot down, 2 feet down, they found a flat rock, and underneath this flat rock, it was about a 12-inch rock, about 3 inches in diameter, 3 inches wide, and underneath was a small case of hard-packed clay. And the case deteriorated. It broke apart when they tried to take it out of the ground. The ground underneath that case was hard-packed, so hard that they had to hit it with pickaxes. How'd that get in the ground?
So seemingly it had been there before the oak tree was there.
Supposedly it had been there before the tree had grown up. And those are called the plates of Voree. There were either 3 or 4 of them. I can't remember which one. It's terrible.
I think Kyle said 6, but anyway.
Yeah, it could be. 6. Well, anyway,
3 to 6
they were
plates.
little teeny tiny things.
Kind of like the Kinderhook plates.
Little tiny plates, and they were written on both sides. Some of it had artistic work, and there was a drawing of a man with stars above him and a scepter, and the message was supposedly there was a great battle that had happened on that hillside. It was called the Hill of Promise, and the people had all died. They'd all been murdered, and they were directed to put these records in the ground because the leader will die, and then the next person will come to lead the people. The person who finds these plates will be the next leader.
It sounds, we've got a lot of Hill Cumorah echoes.
We have a lot of Hill Cumorah.
Did they name themselves? Do you remember? That were in this battle?
Yes. It was supposedly written by the Rasha Manchu of Borito.
Okay.
And I really laughed at that. And I thought, holy cow, this is so stupid.
And so convenient.
Well, if you've got a man as smart as James Strang And the only thing he can come up with, the only name is a Raja Manchu burrito. Well, obviously he's a fake.
Right.
But then I got to thinking, well, how did he get those plates in the ground? It was hard-packed clay.
How do you get the tree to grow around the rocks?
How did he get the tree to go around the rock? It's got the trees, the roots. The grass is undisturbed. It's all it's all hard-packed clay, and these records are in this clay box that falls apart when it's touched. How on earth did that get in the ground? And that haunted me for a long, long time because I couldn't figure it out. And as a matter of fact, it was the cause of my faith crisis that I had with the Mormon Church.
Oh, really?
It really was.
Now remind us, what's the name of the Strangite church?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And what's the difference with our church, the LDS church?
It's the spelling.
We've got a dash, lowercase d.
You've got a hyphen and a small d on day, and the capital D on day for the Strangite church.
Right. That's the only difference in the name.
Exactly.
I had a Facebook comment, and it was like, there's only one church that has the correct name. And I was like, that's actually not true.
I don't think so.
From the Doctrine and Covenants. And I'm like, well, there's actually two.
So
or three, because
people,
I guess the RLDS church used to go as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it wasn't until the polygamy prosecutions that they tacked on reorganized, because they didn't want their property taken and get mixed up with the LDS church.
Exactly.
So
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Vickie Speek, author of God Has Made a Kingdom. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about some amazing, famous Strangites that you'll probably recognize.
can you talk about some prominent members that LDS people
you
would
mean
recognize?
like John E. Page
Okay.
and William Marks
Uh-huh.
and Martin Harris.
Uh-huh. Martin Harris especially, yeah.
Martin Harris, yes, what actually served a Strangite mission
Right.
to England.
If you like what we're doing here on Gospel Tangents, please become a paid subscriber at gospeltangents.com or patreon.com/gospeltangents. We've got full transcripts on our website at gospeltangents.com. And if you'd like to check out some of our other conversations, click over here. Thanks.